Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our very first classroom session at Jig Space. Now, my name is Maddie, and I'm part of the Jig Studio team. We run customer training as well as client services. And essentially, Jig Space and our Jig workshop are designed to be extremely easy to use and to give you the ability to make stunning 3D presentations in a matter of minutes. This session today is going to walk you through all the basic tools and features within our Jig workshop, and you should be ready to create your very own jigs by the end of this class. Now, I'll stop talking in a second because the bulk of this session is going to be run by our very talented Laura, and she is a 3D artist and a Jig expert and also one of the very first Jig Space employees, so you are in very good hands. But before she begins, I just wanted to show you our download page here that you can see on the screen. You're most likely familiar with our website by now as you're watching this session, but if you click the download button at the top, you'll be led to this page, which gives you the ability to download Jig Space for any device. Now I will pass it over to Laura, who will begin this lesson in the Jig Space app in our Explore tab.
This is the Explore tab. Here we have jigs we've made in-house. They're fairly complex and they cover a wide range of different topics. We use them to inspire people that want to use the platform as to what they can make themselves. And here we have the Create tab. This contains a library of your own jigs as well as team jigs. These will have come from people within your company. Shared jigs, and they'll be shared to you via link. We have access to helpful tutorials as well as directly asking for help from our team. We also have access to our community forum, which is a great resource for commonly asked questions, and we also have the dashboard. But in this class today, we'll be exploring how to create a demo jig. So to start off with, I'm going to select New Jig. Now, as you can see, we're in the Jig workshop and we're inside a 3D scene. So to move around the scene, I'm pressing and holding down on the right mouse button. That allows me to rotate in the scene, and to move myself and pan around the scene, I'm pressing the middle mouse scroll wheel. And these basic controls will just let you navigate around the Jig workshop scene. And in the center of the world, you can see that we have these guidelines. These give you an idea where the center of the world is, and they also guide you as to where you should try and keep your model within the scene. So for the focus of the scene, we try to keep things in the center, but we also try to keep things from going or straying too far from the edges of the world. This is just so that when you load your objects in AR mode or in augmented reality using an iPhone or an iPad, when they load up, they're in the center of your phone or the device. Now to start off with, we need to bring our first object into the scene. So to do that, I'm going to go to the left-hand side and open up the model library. And as you can see, we've got a wide range of different models. All of these can be interacted with in the Jig workshop. We also have a large number of different categories. So you can scroll through and find a model and design your jig from what we already have available here. You could also go to websites like TurboSquid or GrabCAD and purchase some models there. But in this case, we're going to start off with one of our own models. So as you can see, our model has loaded into the scene, and at the right-hand side, we have the Jig toolbar. This contains a number of tools that allow you to move and interact with your objects in the scene. Right now, we are on the Move tool. We also have Rotate, Scale, Color, which allows you to change color, transparency, the materials or textures on your model. We also have Spin. If I turn this on, you can add spin to many objects within your scene. This can be especially useful for things like propellers. We also have labels. if we use names from files, this can be great if you have a CAD file with all of the parts pre-labeled in their files names, and this will let you bring them straight into the scene. If you bring in a file and you've turned on names and discovered that they don't have the correct part names you're looking for, you can also clear all the labels and start from scratch. We also have the duplicate tool. I'll be demonstrating this now as we don't use it later in the class. So if I have the duplicate tool selected and I click in the scene, we will create an exact replica of the model we had initially selected. So this is especially useful if you have your model fully textured, fully labeled, and it's all set to go. You can make an exact replica of that model, and that can be useful in cases where you need to show different types of the model with minor differences like color variations. It's a great way for quickly populating your scenes. So the final tool in the toolbar is the delete button. I'm going to remove this duplicate from the scene. So we have our model in the scene. One of the first things we do when we bring a model into Jig is that we give it its materials and textures. So I'm going to zoom in using the scroll wheel, select my model, and I'm going to, while in the color palette menu, I'm going to go to materials and select a material. In this case, I'm going to select rough plastic and give it a dark black color. So our material is on. Next, I'm going to start selecting the sub-objects and give them their materials. So if I select my model and I click up here, I can swap to sub-object mode. And as you can see, that just allows me to select the individual parts that make up the model. So in this case, I'm going to select this piece and while pressing Shift to multi-select, I'm going to select these outer casings, go to color and give them their own material. In this case, a white shiny plastic. So as you can see, the model is already much clearer. Adding the color has helped define the different parts of it. I'm going to add a couple more materials to the model, just a couple of the trim pieces. I'd like them to be a metal. Okay, now that the exterior is fully coloured, the next thing I want to do is select the internal components and give them materials as well. So your first instinct may be to select the object and using the transform tool to move it out of the way. But when you do this, it isn't always easy for you to perfectly align it back to its initial position. As you can see, there's a seam in the middle of the model. So in order to prevent this, I'm going to press Ctrl Z. I can also use the bottom left-hand corner's undo redo tools, but I'm going to press Ctrl Z for now and just get that back to its initial position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another step. Now on step 1, the initial position is stayed, and on step 2, if I pull this model out, I can still go back to step 1 and still have that position recorded. And I can copy this information from step 1 to step 2. So I'm going to delete step 2 for now and start that again from scratch. Now, on step 2 is where I'm going to pull this model out. So what I'm going to keep in mind is that I have a couple of other objects in the scene that I'd also like to move aside. In this case, I'm going to select an object and then press Shift Select. That will allow me to multi-select lots of objects. And while holding down Shift, if I click on them again, I can remove them from my selection. Another way of doing this is you can use the multi-select menu at the bottom of the toolbar. So once I click on this, I'm in the multi-select menu, and any object that I click on automatically gets added to my selection. And again, I can remove them by clicking on them again. We also have a couple of other tools here. We have the lock selection, select all, we have the lasso select tool and the lasso deselect tool. So these are quite useful when working with multiple objects in one big group. So I'm going to select these outward exterior pieces and confirm my selection. And now I'm going to move them aside using the Move tool. As you can see, it's pulled everything across together. I'm also going to move this internal barrel out of the way, just so I can see these pieces underneath. And I'm going to finish adding in my materials. So for these bits of wire, I want them to be a warm copper colour. Just to distinguish between the two different types of wires, I'm giving them a red and a blue. Now once I've added a material, something I can also do is change its colour. In this case, I'm going to make this wire a soft rust colour. Another fun tool of the colour toolbar is that I can use this eyedropper tool. This allows me to copy both the material and colour of another object. So if you watch these little bolts down here and I select the nichrome wire, they get the exact same material. And that can be a great way of speeding up the jig texturing process. Okay, now that we have our objects fully coloured and with their materials, the next thing I want to do is I want to go back to step 1 and I want to copy this position across to step 2. So in order to do this, on step 2, I'm going to use the multi-select menu and then I'll select the lasso select tool. And I'm just drawing a loop around my objects to select everything and press the tick to confirm selection. And now when I go to step 1 and I press and hold on the Move tool, I open up the Replicate tool. So this is one of our most powerful tools in the Jig Workshop. Any attribute that I select from this toolbar, for example, rotate, scale and colour, can be copied across from one step to another. In this case, I just want to copy across the position from step 1 to step 2. So I'm applying that forward 1 step. And as you can see, it's been applied to the next step. So if I go back to step 2, we now have everything on this step fully coloured and with full materials on them. As you can see when I step inside, and we also have the object completely joined together back at its initial position. So with this as a great base step, I'm going to press and hold step 1 in order to remove it. And now step 2 has become our new step 1. Now at this stage of the jig creation process, with your model perfectly textured with colours and materials, it can be a great time for you to save this out as a base file for future projects. So this would allow you to be able to make multiples of similar jigs using this model with the exact same materials, which can be a great way of ensuring consistency amongst different projects. So in order to do this, I'm going to go to the left-hand side and open up the Details panel. In here, I'm going to give it a quick name. It's also a good idea to take a thumbnail picture. This will be the image that you see in the Create section of the JigSpace app. So adding a picture can just help people at a glance see what the jig is going to be about and which models are contained inside it. So you can move around this scene. I'm just going to get a nice dynamic shot of the hairdryer. And with these two details filled in, I'm going to press Save. And now if I scroll down the Details panel, I can make a copy of this jig. Now the copy that I make will be the one that I continue on with. So in this case, I'm going to change the name from base to demo, because that's what we'll be making today. And with that done, I'm going to press save, and I'm going to begin making my jig. So the first thing that we do when making a new jig is we take into consideration that step one is the first thing people will be opening up. So what we like to do is add some introductory text. This text will just be about what the jig is going to cover. Now on step 2, I want to follow through and discuss the internal components that I mentioned on step 1. So what I'm going to do at the beginning is I'm going to pull out this outer casing and reveal those internal components. To do that, I'm pressing Shift in order to multi-select these external pieces. I'm also keeping in mind these little dots, which I'd like to move out of the way as well. And with all of those selected, I'm going to select the Move tool and pull these objects out of the way. I'd also like to have the barrel out of the way as well, so that I can see those internal components there. Now with these out of the way, I'm going to go to the multi-select menu and use the lasso select tool to select them together in one group. And then if I go to color, I can use this hide button to make the transparency turn on. And now when I go from step 1 to step 2, I get a nice smooth transitional fade out of those objects. And now on step 2, because I want to start by discussing how the hairdryer works, I'm going to focus on the intake fan. So what I want to do is give this object a label, as it's the focus of this step. And I'm turning that label on. Now that label will just be visible on step 2. And I also want to give this intake fan some spin. Now something to keep in mind when working with fans is the leading edge of the fan blade. So in this situation, it looks like it's facing forward. So I want this to spin back the other way so that it draws air in. I can also type in a value here, and I want it to spin a bit faster. Now when I click off the fan object, as you can see, it stops spinning. The spin is still present in the scene, but we don't have it spinning all the time unless selected. This is in order for you to be able to select things that are behind the object. For instance, if you had a lot of cogwheels spinning together at the same time and you were trying to select something hidden behind them, it would be very difficult. So that's why we have it turned off unless you have that object selected. So with the intake fan spinning and with it clearly labelled, I'd also like to show that the air is flowing into the hairdryer. In order to do this, I'm going to add in an effects object. So if I go to the model library and I select the effects category, as you can see, we have a number of different effects. For this case, I'm going to select the flow current end. And now that we have this new object in the scene, I'm going to apply it to all of my steps. We consider this best practice so that in later steps, if you decide that you want this object to do different things in the scene, it's still in the scene and it's available. So if I now go from step 2 to step 1, we have this object in step 1 scene as well. So while in step 2, I'm going to position it at the entry point of the hairdryer. To do that, I'm using the Move tool. And now, while rotating the object, I'm going to press down Shift. This will allow me to snap my rotations by 15 degrees, and it can be a great way of achieving a 90-degree turn on your objects. This can be great if some components were designed in different programs and haven't yet been positioned to match up with your objects. It just means that they're easy to align to each other. So with this at the rear of the hairdryer, I'm also going to change its colour to a soft blue, just so you see that it's cool air that's flowing into the hairdryer. So now that it's positioned in step 2, you'll find that it hasn't been changed on step 1. As you can see, it's back to where it initially loaded. So what I want to do is I want to go to step 2, select my object, press and hold in the toolbar to open up the replicate menu, and I'm going to copy its position, rotation, scale and colour. And I'm going to copy those across to step 1. And while on step 1, I'm going to hide it and turn on its transparency. And now when I go from step 1 to step 2, I get a nice fade in of this effects object here, as well as a fade out of the external casing. So we have our step 2 arranged. What I'm going to do next is add in the instructional information describing what's happening in the scene. And for my next scene, I'm going to add another step. And now on step 3, I want to show the air being heated up by these pieces at the front of the hairdryer. So what I want to do is I want to remove a bit of the distraction that's happening in the right-hand side of the screen. With the focus on the left-hand side, these are drawing a bit too much of that focus. So I'm going to select the flow object, go to the color tool and hide its visibility. I'm also going to select the intake fan and turn off its label, as it's no longer the focus of this scene. And now I'm going to focus on these front components. So the main focus of this step will be the nichrome wire. So I'm going to label that. Now, another part of this step is that I want to show the air being heated up. So on this step, it's the nichrome wire that heats up the air. So I'm going to select the nichrome wire and give it a warm red colour. I'll also select the mica plating and give it a warmer colour as well. And now when I go from step 2 to step 3, you can see that this fades into a soft, warm red. So with that part done, I also want to show the air coming out the other end and show that it's warmed. So to do that, I'm going to bring in another effects object. I'll select the flow cone out. And again, I'm replicating this object across all of my steps so that I can edit it later if I decide to. And now I'm going to position this at the end of the hairdryer. Again, I'm pressing Shift to snap my rotations. Now I'm conscious of the fact that the nozzle narrows at the end, so I'm also going to snap its scale and draw that in and position it right at the nozzle front. And I'd also like to show that this air is heating up, so I'm going to give it a soft red colour as well. So I'm going to add the instructional text for step 3. And now I'm going to step through and have a look at my 3 steps so far. I'm conscious of the fact that I haven't copied these across, so I think that front air effect is going to move back to its initial position. So what I'm going to do is go to step 3 and select this object and press and hold to open the replicate menu. Now again, I'm going to select my movement or position, my rotation, scale, and the color. And I'm going to copy those across to all of my previous steps. And now on step 2, I'm going to select this and hide it, turning on its transparency. And I'm going to copy just the color and its transparency across to the previous step. So now if I step through from 1 to 3, I think I'll have nice smooth transitions. Now I'm pretty happy with this. The next thing I'd like to do is show the hairdryer fully enclosed, but while it's turned on. So to do this, I'm going to select step 1 and add a new step. And as you can see, it's an exact duplicate of step 1. Now on this step, because I've replicated my objects from step 3, the flow object here, and step 2, onto all of my steps, while in step 4, these objects are still present in the scene. So I can select them and turn off their transparency to make them fully visible. And you can see the flow of the air flowing through the hairdryer. So the next thing I'm going to do to demonstrate that the hairdryer is turned on is move its switch from the off to the on position. So I'm going to lift that up. I'm also going to make a couple of these objects appear to glow as though they have backlighting. I'll select these bars and these dots here. And in the color palette, I'm going to go to materials and scroll down to the unlit material. This means that it isn't affected by lighting or shadows in the scene, and it will be as bright as that color possibly can be. So if I crank this up to the brightest white, you can see that it looks as though it's glowing. And now when I go from step 1 to step 4, you can see that it looks like the hairdryer has turned itself on. Now another thing that I want to add in to add some realism to my scene is a sound effect. So if I go down to the instructions panel here, you can see that I have the ability to record as well as add in sound effects. If I hit the record button and I speak into a microphone, I'll be able to save that recording on this step. So it's a great way of adding in further information or instructional guides. In this case, I'm just going to add in the sound effect. And now when I press the play button, you can hear the hairdryer sound effect. I can press pause to stop it, and I can also remove it by pressing the delete button. So our jig is looking good, but there's one last feature I'd like to add in. So I'm going to add another clean step. So I'll select step 1 and add a duplicate of step 1. So now I have step 5. I'm going to go to our model library. And I'm going to add in a screen object. Here we have some common screen ratios. Now I'm going to duplicate this object across all steps. And on step 5, I'm going to position it behind my hairdryer as a backing screen. Now, with an object like this, I could add in images as well as videos. Images would be a great way of adding in data. You could add in graphs or any other type of media that you have relating to a product. In this case, I'm going to add in one of the videos we've prepared. So I'm selecting the color palette and I'm going to textures. And here I'll add in a video file. Now, video files will always load in a little bit more slowly. That's because GigSpace is running compression on the footage to get the best sound quality possible as well as video quality without letting the jig run slowly. Now, as you can see, it's loaded into the scene, but it looks white as it does here. This is because the video doesn't play automatically in the Jig Workshop. it will be visible in AR mode or in augmented reality or even in view mode. But for now, it's white because the first frame of that footage was a white frame. If you load in a video and you find that it's black, the reason it's black is likely because that's often the first frame of your video. So with this in the scene, I'm mindful that on step 4, 3, 2, and 1, I have that object positioned in its initial position. So I'm going to select step 5, and I'm going to select my object, and selecting scale, rotation, and position, I'm going to copy those across to the previous steps. The reason I'm not copying the color across is because the color contains that video information. And our video file also contains the sound effects. Now, I don't want the video to conflict with step 4, so I don't want that copied across to step 4. So with these 3 selected, I'm going to replicate them across the previous steps. And now when I go to step 4, I can make this transparent. And I can copy just the transparency across to the previous steps. And now when I step through from step 1 to step 5, I'm happy with all of those transitions, so it's time to view them in AR. Now if I start off on step 1, I can zoom in. As you can see, the intake fan is spinning and we've got our flow running through the hairdryer. We also have the nickel wire heating up and the hot air coming out the other end. If you listen carefully, we've got the hairdryer sound effect playing. If I press the sound effect button, I can turn that off and mute it. And on step 5, we have our video playing. As you can hear, we've got the sound effects from that video as well. And this object works like a normal object in the scene. So I can move around it, step behind it. And it's just a great way of adding further content into your jigs. So with my jig fully complete, the next thing I want to do is finish off adding in its details and save it out. So I'm going to the left-hand details panel. I'm going to scroll up and add in a description. It can also be a great idea to add in a date and the creator's name. This will just mean that it's easy for you to track down who created the jig so that they can make any changes necessary. Tags are a great way for refining your searches in the Create tab of the Jigspace app. If I add in hairdryer, it will just make it easier to search for. I could also add in a part number, and that will help you understand which of the models contain which parts in case there are any updates. Now we have our thumbnail from the initial model, but it no longer reflects the main focus of this jig, which is the internal components. So I'm going to change which thumbnail I use. So clicking back into our scene, I'm going to select step 3, which shows the hot air inside our hairdryer, and I'm going to use this as our new thumbnail image. It's good to create a new thumbnail image so that you can differentiate it from that demo file we saved out earlier. And now we have a couple of other tools. We have our presentation options. Here you can change the background color of your jig. This can be a great option for when you have a model with lots of small white or silver pieces in the scene. If you select the black background, these will contrast against that quite well. You can also select a color that matches your product branding. It's up to you. But in this case, I'm going to keep it white for now. And we also have autoplay steps. And when I select this, it opens up our menu. Now, when you autoplay steps, you can select the time it takes for each step to loop onto the next one. I would recommend that you find which step has the longest instructions or text in it, and you time yourself reading that. And then you use that time as the time for the looping, because you want to make sure that everyone has the ability to read your text before it steps on. You can also add looping to your jig. That will just mean when you hit your final step, it loops back to step one and continues through the jig. In this case, I'm just going to keep this option off. And now we have our sharing jigs. If you want to share a jig link, it's important to make that jig link public. This means that you can share it amongst employees or amongst stakeholders of your jig, and they can have a look at it. And if you need to make it private later on, you can just select it and switch it back to private. And then those links will no longer be active. For now, I'm just going to leave it on. And then you can copy this, and this link will allow you to share the jig via email or any other media. You can also share it on chats. People will be able to click on the link, and if they have the app installed, it will automatically load them straight into the jig. And if it doesn't have the app installed, it'll take them to our loading page where they'll be able to download the app. And then once they click on it again, it'll load straight in. And one of our final options is team access. So this can be a great option if you're working within a company account and you want other people to be able to view and review your jigs. By clicking this and selecting OK, anyone that opens up the JigSpace app and logs into their own account will be able to see it in their Team Jig section. So with all of this completed, I'm going to press save and go back out into the main menu. And now, as you can see, we have our two jigs here, both the base model and the demo jig. And if I go to Team Jigs, and as you can see, our hairdryer jig demo has loaded into the Team's Jig section. And if I select this and go to the details panel, I can also create a QR code of this jig. So using this image and saving it out, I will be able to add this to any form of media that I have. I can add it to pamphlets or instruction manuals, and people will be able to load up my jig and learn more about our new product.
Thank you so much for that, Laura. And I've actually just scanned that QR code on my phone, and I just wanted to show you guys what a jig looks like in augmented reality, because obviously augmented reality and having the ability to view these jigs in one's own environment is one of our most powerful tools at JigSpace. If you were creating a product demonstration, customers being able to see this product in their own environment is extremely important. But we also have a lot of customers using jigs for training, for sales, for prototyping, and essentially anything where 3D visualization is key to achieving a purpose. And we've also just launched Web Viewer and App Clips, which means that you no longer need the JigSpace app downloaded on your device to be able to view jigs. Essentially, they're available for any device. And lastly, I wanted to give you a quick overview of the Jig dashboard. Our dashboard is an online resource. You can access it via the app, but you can also simply Google it by writing dashboard.jig.space. And essentially, our dashboard is an online resource, and it gives you more comprehensive functionality, particularly with respect to sharing settings, privacy settings, team sharing settings. All of that is accessed via our Jig dashboard. So you can see all the tabs on the left-hand side of the screen will take you to different functionalities with respect to what I've just mentioned. And then by clicking on one of the thumbnails of your jigs, you also have the ability here to share that specific jig with your team, make it public. You can also make copies of jigs and transfer ownership so that certain team members can have private ownership of specific jigs. So all of this ability and functionality can be accessed via our dashboard. So that brings us to the end of this first classroom session. Now, we hope everyone enjoyed it, and we hope you also learnt a lot and you feel a lot more confident using JigSpace now. Before you leave, I just wanted to bring your attention to some of the resources that we'll have on this webpage. So we will have documentation, which will include all the features and tools that we learnt in this lesson today. If you enjoy reading rather than watching, we'll also have a link to the jig so that you can watch it back and see the jig that Laura created in this class today. We'll also have a 3D model, a sound file, and a video file. Now, all of these will be the files that Laura used to create this jig today. And the reason we've uploaded them is so that you can go back and attempt to create this jig yourself and actually put the skills you've learnt today to practice. If you struggle with that, we'll also have a link for you to ask any questions or give us any feedback, and also a link to book a one-on-one session with someone from our team if you're looking to go a bit deeper into JigSpace. So that is the end of our session today. Thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy using JigSpace.